Hello and welcome to the NOTstalgia podcast.
A podcast where we discuss the retelling or continuation of pop culture favorites as seen through a queer and feminist lens.
My name's Eric Lefebvre.
And my name is Jessica Tercero.
And this week we are joined by a special guest, Ashley Taylor. Welcome to the program. How are you?
So excited. A long-time listener, first-time caller?
Yeah. Guest hyphen caller.
Yes. There you go.
And so this... Oh, no, you go.
We're so happy to have you. Ashley has been one of my best friends for 15 years. I think we said it earlier. Oh my gosh, you're one of my oldest friends. This is incredible. Also, Ashley is just one of the coolest people I've ever met. So we're so excited to have her. And we had a request to do the Phantom of the Opera from listener Nicole. And then Ashley, a few weeks later, hit me up and said, hey, can we do Phantom? I really want to do Phantom. And I was like, oh my God, yes, let's do this. So multiple requests for this episode. Excited.
Which is exciting, yeah, because I guess this is the perfect part to get into our history. So Ashley, what is your history with Phantom of the Opera, Phantom lore?
Oh, Phantom lore. Well, it started just because probably most people's parents, I don't know, maybe not most people's parents, but my dad had the Andrew Lloyd Webber greatest hits CD, and we would be out in the garage fixing cars or something, and it would just be on, right? And as a kid, I thought it was cool because the voice sounded like Jack Skellington, which I loved as a kid. I was wrong. They are not the same voice actor. But I still like the music. And later on growing up, I got into I was the nerd in French class. I really liked French history. Stumbled upon something about the opera house in Paris. And it all the connections were there already. I was just a huge nerd in high school. And this is a real place. The Phantom of the Opera takes place in a real opera house that exists. It's a fictional story, of course, but it just kind of grew from there. And by 2004, it was a year after I graduated high school. I was in. I have never seen the stage play, just to be out there. I mean, I've seen it on Netflix or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Which it has a sequel, which I didn't even realize. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Anyways.
The sequel is something else. That's for another podcast.
Oh my God, I'm so curious. Okay.
But it's just been around my whole life, and I just fell in love with it. Again, a huge nerd in high school, just loved the music of it. And I don't know how you watch an Andrew Lloyd Webber musical and not love the music.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of been around my whole life, and I loved it. And the story of Christine is something that I resonate with a lot. We'll definitely get into that, but that's kind of my history with it.
Jess, what is your history with Phantom of the Opera?
I have no history with Phantom of the Opera.
Gorgeous.
So I know, it's one of those things that's in the cultural zeitgeist, out in the ether, in the world I know of. I know the look mostly, and I know that there's a scene in the rafters and that people are crazy about this, they love it, but I knew nothing else. I knew so little about this that I didn't even recognize the main theme of the song, the da 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 da. I did not even know that was Phantom of the Opera. Mm-hmm. So now I'm I have heard this so many fucking times in my life.
Yeah.
What a treat. I'm really excited to talk about this with you, Ashley, because like you, especially in the 2004 version, I feel I identify with Christine quite a bit, and there's a lot to say. But anyways,
yeah.
How about you, Eric? What is your history?
My history, it's literally all musical. I didn't even know that the Phantom was a universal monster, a classic 20s monster.
Same.
I didn't know that. I've seen that face so many times, and I've been oh yeah, that's one of the monsters. I don't know his name. Had no idea that was the Phantom of the Opera. Anyways, so my history with the musical itself is really just the musical. growing up in high school, I did musical theater, love musical theater. We actually did one year, it was a review, and so we did a bunch of different musical songs, and for it we did Masquerade from Phantom. And you know that little interstitial with Christine and Raoul, or they like get engaged and he's like, oh, let's not argue, like whatever. I played Raoul in that scene.
Did you?
For that little moment. Yeah. So it was really like a 3-line moment and like a small solo, but it was still really cool. And then apart from that, I've seen the musical the movie several times, and I've seen bits of recorded stage version. I've never seen it in person. But I've always wanted to, just because of like the falling chandelier and like the whole spectacle of it. And it's one of those things where like Andrew Lloyd Webber is so funny to me. Like his music is good, but I feel like his music is always wrapped up in the weirdest shows. Like I don't know, like Cats is like a mess.
Wait,
but
did
it's
he
like
do
fun.
Cats too?
He did Cats.
I know
Cats
nothing
is-
about Cats.
Cats is a mess, and it's fun, and some of the songs are fantastic, but as a show you're like, what? And some could even argue with Phantom, like it's a cool story and like great, and some of it's like, wait, what? And then what did he do? Jesus Christ Superstar and like a Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. So he's done like a bunch of cool stuff, and he's a great musician, and I think he makes some of the most iconic like hooks, like that ba 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 ba, and like Music of the Night, like everything. There are so many good songs in this that are just like earworms, and because he loves to do like reprisals, where it'll be like that's the song, but we've already heard it, we've heard the coda, and now like he's gonna pull it back like 17 other times, like casually, where you're just like you're hearing that little do 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 every like 5 minutes. He makes shit get stuck in your head. So I like his stuff for that reason. Anyway, that's my history with Andrew Lloyd Webber and Phantom. Phantom of the Opera is what we're doing here.
Bring it back.
Yes.
Again, I've heard Andrew Lloyd Webber, but I've never like known what he's been attached to. So I feel like I'm just like, this podcast is expanding my horizons. So thank you, everybody. And we love growth. So you guys get to see this growth. Like, oh my gosh. Cool. Should we talk about it?
Let's do it. Let's get into this first one. Beneath the Paris Opera House, an elusive man calling himself the Phantom stalks chorus girl Christine Daae. After abruptly rising to fame thanks to the Phantom's actions behind the scenes, Christine attempts to break up with her lover, Victor Raoul de Chamille, period. The Phantom attempts to blackmail the opera owners and their leading actress into having Christine take over the lead role permanently. However, the group choose to ignore the threat, leading the Phantom to drop the opera house chandelier on guests during a performance. Immediately after, Christine finds herself in her dressing room where she is visited by the Phantom, who persuades her to follow him through a secret door in her dressing room. She reluctantly follows the Phantom to his lair deep in Paris underground, where he professes his, big air quotes, love for her, causing her to faint.
When she wakes up, she unmasks the Phantom, causing him to dramatically lose his composure and declare her his prisoner. After his fit is over, she convinces him to let her sing in the opera again just one last time. Before her final performance, she attends the masquerade where she secretly meets with Raoul and plots an escape from the opera. Unfortunately, the Phantom is indeed a stalker and heard the whole thing. Furious, the Phantom kidnaps Christine on the eve of the performance, and Raoul teams up with undercover cop Ledoux to find them. They enter the catacombs and end up in one of the Phantom's torture chambers. The Phantom uses the opportunity to force Christine to choose, big air quotes, to become his wife in exchange for Raoul and Ledoux's lives. Suddenly, a mob shows up at the Phantom's door, and he attempts to escape with Christine, but she escapes as the mob catches up to the Phantom, murdering him and throwing him into the river Seine.
So this is 1924, 25. 25?
25.
25. Which, while I was watching it, my boyfriend Ashley is named Eric, so we're two Erics.
With a K.
With a K.
So.
He's a K, I'm a C.
Okay.
Gorgeous. But we were watching it, and this is almost literally 100 years old. Isn't that wild?
That's nuts.
That's so wild to me. This is a 100-year-old film, practically.
And
what?
So,
whoa.
for our listeners, if you haven't watched this, this is also before talkies. So this is a silent film.
Yes.
So watching it, at first I was like, okay, I guess we'll do the first one. We'll see how this goes. But it was actually a lot more fun and engaging than I thought it was going to be. And they did some really cool stuff with like the tint of the film. Like sometimes it's black and white, sometimes it's sepia, sometimes it's green, like whenever the Phantom is around. And I thought that was just like a really neat way to like break this up. And also what a joy to like watch this from like literally the dawn of like, you know, movies. And like there's some times where you can see the tape where they stitch like scenes together and things, which is also something. So apparently when this film was shown, it was in a different order than what we saw today. I was reading on Wikipedia because I go to Wikipedia to try to like, okay, like what happened to like put together the intros, right? And it like apparently they reordered some of it and they added some more stuff later on. So like what we see today is not necessarily the true version, depending on like where you watched it and stuff, which is interesting because as we famously know on this pod, that can just like really recontextualize everything. And so I'm really fascinated with that, with the fact that they just went back in and redid it. But yeah, it's very good. It's on Amazon. Anyways,
you said at the beginning of that, you said before talkies, and in my head I was just like, you mean the chip? Like talkies, like TAKIS. I was like, wait, when did they start? Like what? Isn't that Frito-Lay? Like when did Frito-Lay begin?
I love your brain so much, Eric.
I like it didn't even dawn on me that you're talking about like talkies the movies. My gosh. I was just like, oh yeah, snacks, 100%. Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, it was interesting watching it because my history with like silent films is very sparse. Like I've seen very few of them. Ultimately because I think they're very boring. Like I'm not super engaged with a lot of silent films in general, apart from a very few. And this one was like, it was actually way more enjoyable than I expected.
Yeah. I think they also conveyed the story pretty well too. Like there wasn't a lot of like nuance to it, but it's interesting. So this is a horror movie, right? Whereas the next one that we're going to watch is genres on IMDb are romance and musical, right? Which is so interesting to me because I do think that it is still horror. And God. When we move forward, we can talk about those tropes and how like, because that plays very much into like gender expectations or what we're supposed to want or need. And is this horror? No, it's romance. So it gets messy and I'm very excited to talk about that. But this is unmistakably horror. This is like at no part are you trying to sympathize with the Phantom for what he's done or what he's doing.
I just also love how big of like a toxic fandom story it is. Where he's just like obsessed with her. He's like, you're my star, you're my goddess, you're my pop diva. Like, it is you. You bang out all the hits. I've known you forever. I'm your number one fan, girl. Let's go. Like, I need you on stage. I will burn this fucking place down if you do not perform tonight. Like, I am waiting for tickets. I will literally blackmail the owners of this place to get you in the role. And it's so funny to me. Like, it's like, obviously it's scary and obviously it's toxic, but he is such like, he's so silly. He's like, he's so gay, and it's so funny to me. Like I don't know. I was saying earlier some of like the quotes where he's like, he sends all these cute little letters, and he's like, "Dear Carlotta, I advise you to be ill. Love the Phantom, or not love the Phantom, but like might as well have been like heart Phantom. Like I advise you to be ill. Like." And he's just
one of my favorite lines that he said is like when Christine runs into like his bedroom, presumably, and his bed is a coffin, and she's like, "What the fuck?" And he's like, "It keeps me reminded of that other dreamless sleep that cures all ills forever." It's like, oh my god, you're so emo.
It's so cool. He's so emo.
I had the same thought.
Yeah, he's just like. I love that quote. And I mean, I have so many quotes because the other one is like when she takes her mask off and he's like, "Urgh," and then he's telling her, he's like, "I like glut your soul on my accursed ugliness." I'm like, oh my God, that's so cool. Glut your soul on my accursed ugliness. Like, take it all in. I'm gross. Get it through your fate. Like, he is so dramatic. He is so drama. And it's so funny.
And he like throws the biggest fits too. Like
he does. For being this like big little incel baby, he's like just like He's so funny and silly.
You're so right. Like, and I had that note, especially for the next one, where he is like that big toxic fan that like is just online, that is just like, oh, you're the best. I'm gonna do everything to make sure that you rise to stardom and take credit for her success, and like all these things. And so then also to feel like that ownership over her, like, because he talks about that a lot in here, where I mean he's so good at like verbal manipulation right, that she is literally hypnotized by him, where he's like literally telling her what to think and telling her what to do. And he like in this one specifically, he is like, you're my slave, I'm your master. Like, he's using all of this language, and I'm like, okay. And he's like, I'm gonna prove how much I love you, slave. And I'm like, oh my god.
It's a lot. It is so much.
Well, and the worst part of all of that is like he puts it in a framework of like, look, I've been training you for, at least in this version, months.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Months.
I've been training you for months. By the way, I placed the world at your feet because I did whatever to Carlotta or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm willing to poison people to make sure you freaking sing, right? But he's like, you owe me. But then there's a lot of other talk about like how she's going to fix him somehow. Like,
yes. I also picked up on exactly what you were saying too.
Yeah.
Like a little chunk of my notes is about him convincing her that she's the only one that can save him.
Well, also using her like big air quotes purity and like angelicness as like as like a salve, as like a tool for like problem solving for him.
Indeed.
Like that, what was the quote? Like, I'm aroused by your purity, first and foremost.
Yes.
Nasty,
Yes.
get out of my face.
Was.
But secondly, he sees her beauty, her skill, and like the future she has ahead of her. Because like there's a level to Christine Daae where she is like, she's very competent and good and like capable in every capacity, even though other people don't really see it because of Carlotta, right? She's the boss. She's like the nepotism kid.
She's the diva before.
Yeah.
Yes.
So things are as they are, but Christine, obviously, when given the chance, she gets out there and shines, and she's it. He sees that, and I think it's like he wants everything that she has, her future, her beauty, her everything, and he's guising it as like a, if I have you as a romantic partner, I will inherit all of those things by proximity, which is just like, A, no, that's not how that works, and B, go away. Like, I'm sorry, and I know that we get more backstory in like the next one, and I'm sorry, like, the world hates you, and they hate the fact that you don't look like a lot of other people, and that's like really unfortunate, and that sucks. But you don't gotta do this. Like, I don't know.
He doesn't. And I mean, there's a big part of it. Like, I see a lot of symbolism in the shadows that they used in the film, like a lot. There's a lot of light and dark, high society, and where he lives is low. There's a part where they go on the roof and there's angel statues that he's hiding among. And, there's a lot of that good and evil. And he twists it all up, right? And that, I mean, that's the genius of that character, I think. But it's kind of like you can't, God, and it's prevalent in both films too. But you're not going to force anyone to love you. Like, you have to work on yourself first, right? And clearly that is not happening.
Yeah. And I think that juxtaposition of like he's hiding amongst the angels, listening to this conversation, like you were talking about with like high society, low society, because it is like a caste system still in French. I almost said in France. In France. Yeah. So it's like, I think that is really cool, and I didn't think about that, like him hiding amongst the angels, especially with like the next one where he's like himself like is referring to himself as like the angel of music, right? Very predatorily, which again we will get into. But like one of the things that I wasn't a big fan of, like I understand that this character is messy, and I think it's good because of that. But I think that part of the mess that I'm not really into is that he is deformed, right? He's disfigured like on his face. So he like that's what makes him shunned from society, and then an incel murderer, right? And like nowadays, like everybody's like trying to, have this conversation about like accept yourself and accept your body, and let's, raise awareness. Let's make sure that we're not being judgmental and stuff like that, which absolutely wasn't the case back then. But like, I don't love the fact that that turned him into this little incel baby, like we were talking about, like, because I feel like that just perpetuates some of that stereotype with, like, oh, they're deformed, so they're inherently bad, or oh, this,
Yeah.
so this, because, like, I think it was just a weird choice for the story.
Yeah, I mean, it relies so heavily on like we've talked about this in so many things, but like in a lot of horror movies, and I mean, this is like classic. This is so old. This is like pre-genre. There is the trope of, and maybe this is one of the things that sets that up, is like anything that looks atypical, whether that's like a disability, a deformity, or anything other than what is typically acceptable in like regular business society, is deemed disgusting, scary, and bad. Like without any sort of like empathetic perspective, any sort of like compassion, it's simply disgusting. In most horror movies, and that includes like age shit, like anybody who's like 70 plus, like, ew, they're gross and like old, and it's like, oh, that's so scary, and like it's such like a boring trope.
Insert old beach by
yeah,
M. Night
I mean,
Shyamalan.
well, base level, he wants love, he wants affection, and that's just
There is a line that I really like from him kind of talking about this, where he says, and says, big air quotes, because it's like projected onto the screen, which is great because there's not a lot of lines in this movie, but like, you know, whatever, I think they did a good job of like having very pointed dialogue, which is great. So kudos to this film. He says, if I'm the Phantom, it's because man's hatred made me so. If I shall be saved, it's because your love redeems me. So, like, a lot of him just wants to be seen as a person, and I think we can all absolutely relate to that, right? And we all have our own insecurities and things like that. But because he was shunned, he essentially, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So, like, I think when we look at that line, which the other one doesn't really have this line, right? Where it's like, society turned me into this. I didn't have a choice, right? And I mean, of course, yes, you always have a choice, but I like that line being there because I feel like that's at least kind of acknowledging, like, you know, it's not saying like, oh, I am deformed, therefore I am bad. It's like, well, society fucked me up, you know?
Yeah, it's because then that whole conversation dips so hard into like incel shit, where
Yes,
it's like, it's
it
not
does.
me, it has nothing to do with me, it's everybody else, and I'm the victim. Which, to be fair, sure, that's part of it, but that's not entirely it, right?
Correct.
There is self-accountability. There should be a conversation about like action, like what have you done on your end? And it's like, oh, all of these bad things that include murder, kidnapping, and grooming. Cool. So maybe it's not just society, like maybe it's also you.
Correct.
Yeah,
There's symbolism in his backstory too. I know we're skipping ahead a little bit on this, but did you see that card that they pulled out of the office or the library about him?
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Where they were
I don't
talking
remember that.
about like he was born in the middle of a massacre, self-educated musician, mastered the black arts, right? So he was exiled to Devil's Island, and he was diagnosed as insane, and now he lives in the torture chamber where he was tortured. So, like, a lot of this is icky and working against him. I think if he wasn't, again, if so much of him wasn't centered around the deformity, then I think, like, yeah, it's 100% incel stuff, but like they're trying to like gain our sympathies because of that. So it's just, it is weird.
Like, the thing about knowing somebody's backstory is you don't get to forgive the crimes that he's committing, but it does make it understandable and easier to process for everyone who's going through it, right?
Yeah.
Part of that massacre, like, France has gone through many revolutions. The Boulevard Massacre took place in 1848. So, I mean, if you do the math, he's a little bit older in that sense. But it's part of the Second French Revolution. And I didn't take the note on it exactly what it was about, but it really was focused on like the right to work, no matter your circumstances. So for a guy who has a facial deformality, being shunned by society, like he probably can't get work. Like he probably can't in that time. So, I mean, you start to think that he was born during this time, like his parents were affected. There's a little bit of generational stuff going on there. He got sent to this place called Devil's Island, which, okay, mental health treatment, probably not very great.
Yeah.
In Devil's Island.
Yeah.
Like, of course he would want to escape. Like, who wouldn't? So, okay, maybe you can kind of understand, like, okay, this is why he escaped here and did this, because he's a self-educated musician. And of course he's going to go to like the place that has the best music around, right? It's Paris Opera House. So I get a little bit of backstory on that, but that does not excuse, people.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Because I love context, especially, and this is something that we talk about a lot, is like well-written villains are always the ones that to some degree you can sympathize with, right? Like you can see like justifiably, like I understand where you're coming from. Does that make it right? No. But character-wise, as somebody in your circumstance, do I understand some semblance of like why? Yeah. That doesn't make it good. So that to me, I love when I miss that card. Because to me, I just thought it was just like, where is he? Like I thought we missed the backstory in this one. But I love complex villains. And he's a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. Like there's, even for a silent film, we have a complex villain, which I think is really interesting and really great. But yeah, like I do think that things that I liked that he was doing, blackmailing the owners, right? Being like, give me my box, give me my monthly stipend. Like, great. That is the kind of stuff that I can get down with, right? But like, we had this conversation, Eric, on like other pods too, where it's like, take revenge on the people that shunned you, take revenge on these people. But I mean, he right now is just like, and maybe this is why he's drawn to Christine, because like she does represent that innocence that he so wishes that he has, or that he like could emulate, because he's just been so fucked up by the world, and shunned and everything that we're talking about. So I love him taking action on everybody else, but Christine doesn't deserve that. And I think that the way that he's just so predatory, because he obviously, like you were saying, Ashley, he is older than her, right? He is absolutely very specifically targeting her, even more so in the next one, right? Where he's like, you are going to sing my opera. Like, you, I've known since you were 7, is going to be the one to sing this. So just like grooming her through like in all of these ways, to the point to where when he kidnaps her, he has a whole room set up, and he's got makeup and jewelry and a wedding dress and a literal whole room like just dedicated to her and these things. And so one of the things I identify with Christine, like mostly in the next one, because I feel like in this one, Christine isn't really a person. She's more of an object. She doesn't really have a say. She is like, there for the Phantom to kind of project what he wants to be onto her. And Raoul is just kind of like, he doesn't really want to save her. Like, I don't know. He saves her, but it's like she's more objectified and everything, right? So but having this conversation about what it looks like to be targeted, and what it looks like to be groomed, and to be manipulated, and to feel bad, like, because especially in the next one, he really plays on that, like, feel bad for me, feel bad to me, to the point where she kisses him, and I'm like, oh my fucking God. But yeah, like, and I think that is just a really interesting thing, and I love that in this movie it's horror, and in the next one it's presented as romance. And I think that is something that, as like a society, we have decided that, it's still romantic, even though it's a little bit weird. I mean, it's still like, telling us how we're supposed to want to be sought after, this sort of thing. So like, because it's not just horror, it like literally it's romance / musical. Like, I have a big problem with that, and I'm excited to talk about that in the next one. But in this one, it is horror, and it is absolutely like, even when she's sorry, I'm going on a whole rant, but when she's taken the first time by the Phantom, right? She goes through the mirror, and you can tell she's like trying, like he's hypnotized her, right? Or like, black magic, whatever, where she's trying to move away, and he keeps like, no, and like repositioning her, but she's kind of in this trance, right? To where like even getting in the boat was a hassle. And then you even see like a part of her dress just like defiantly while they're in the water, trailing behind them, like it's trying to leave. And then she eventually leaves that part of the dress behind. She doesn't want to go, she doesn't want to be there, but literally this person has taken away her choice.
Well, Here's a little bit more history. Sorry, I'm here for the history.
No, I mean, honestly,
We love
give us the
context.
context.
So L'Opera Garnier, I totally said that wrong, and I'm the one who like took French for 4 years. L'Opera Garnier, which literally translated is palace garnish. Garnier is actually the last name of the architect, but Garnier is garnish in French. This place has been around in some form since like the 1600s. Like it's old. The history of it is that because ballet became so popular in this time frame, 1860s, 1870s, it kind of got away from opera formal to ballet. And an option for a lot of girls who were either orphaned, had hard times, whatever, they were taken to this opera house to learn ballet, learn a skill, learn to support themselves. And then because it was like the opera house of the world, essentially, like you're in high society Paris, and Paris is amazing, you know, like the fancy place in the entire world this time. You're probably going to meet some rich guys and set yourself up pretty well, you know. And after the fire, there was a big fire for the opera house. It took 14 years to rebuild this place. That's a long time.
That's a long time.
I mean, the principal reason for that was because it was built over a lake. So that's part of it.
So there really is a lake underneath the
there really
opera
is.
house.
To this day, it is still there.
Oh.
Yeah. Because
like I've been to the catacombs and been underneath, and I'm like, oh my god, this is so scary.
You went to the
like
catacombs?
I did. I was surprised that I was like, oh my gosh, they could have absolutely turned this into a horror if they just had all of the skulls, like if they had them walking down like all of the catacombs, because there's so many catacombs beneath Paris where like they haven't even mapped all of them, and it literally is just like hundreds of human skulls and bones just like going down this corridor, and it's pretty terrifying and pretty surreal. But yeah, I didn't realize that there's actually like a lake under there too, so that also
there's like a high water table or something. So they have like this lake underneath. So like when they're in the boat and they're going through all of that, like that's like simple. It's not as huge, you know.
Sure.
But yeah, that's like a real thing. But anyway, during the rebuilding, like I don't know how to explain it other than I just caught the tail end of a documentary on PBS some time ago. But they built a section of the opera house just for rich season ticket holders to go and meet these ballerinas and proposition them. That's the way they presented it. So proposition, and there's like a whole slew of books out there if you're really interested. This is the part that I really did have to research. But there's a whole slew of books out there that really talks about like culture for women in this place. So these people really are being bred essentially to perform, of course, which is really grueling, and it takes a lot of dedication and commitment, but for what? So that they can go off and be married and have a decent life. So that's kind of like, or whatever. So that's what we're coming into with Christine. She's orphaned, right? Her father passes away. And at least in the 1925 one, she's only been there for a few months. And here's this dude trying to control her. Like, I get that he has control issues, but it's like, wow, that's rough. So when you're talking about like these people are being groomed, like, yeah, that is totally something that really happens.
So she's being groomed on two separate levels, right? She's being groomed to be available to for rich people, right? Which we see with Raoul, because like I don't really, in this 1925 one, I'm like, he just wants ownership of her. Like this is transactional, is kind of how that felt to me, right?
Yeah.
And then, so she's being groomed on that level, but then she's also being groomed on like this other gross secret, another layer of gross, secretive, like groomception. Ugh, gross.
Wow, yeah. And that's not to say that there weren't women who didn't have any part of that. There were people who just, nope, not gonna do it, but it was an extra form of income for them. So, you know, take that with a grain of salt. So another thing that they would do is these rich patrons, like all the flowers in our dressing rooms and everything, like you could get a sponsor, a rich guy who comes to the opera a lot. If they liked you, they would pay for your singing lessons. They would pay for your dance lessons. They would pay for all these things. And you could advance your career if people liked you.
Bless.
Wow.
That's
We
my
love a sugar daddy.
I mean, I was just gonna say, see that to me, standalone outside of the context of like literal female objectification and like grooming and sales and all of that, that by itself, it's like, oh God, like I want that part. Like sign me up. Oh, you think I'm talented? Like, yeah, daddy, give me money. Like that's it. My form of like service to you and payment is like to succeed. You will see me succeed and rise, and you're gonna be like, "That's my girl,"
And be
that's
hot.
it. And be hot.
Yeah.
Oh God, what a dream!
I mean,
just that portion, because that's like, I think that's like the coolest version of it, where it's like, I have money. This person is really talented. I'm gonna sponsor them. I want to see them go far.
I'm totally with you there, Eric. I also, it's really interesting that you said that, Ashley, because like all of the flowers and the dressing rooms, I'm like, oh my God, just like sign me up. Like I will live in any one of these rooms, right? But like, I think it's really interesting because where these other men, these other like benefactors and stuff can offer Christine just an abundance of wealth and an abundance of, whatever she needs to take care of herself and everything. All he can really offer her is a single red rose. That's it. Just the one. That's all that he can give to her, right? And he still feels like he owns her and that she is his because he taught her how to sing a few scales,
Yeah. It's interesting just because this is such an old movie that like there is no nuance in like the fact that women aren't people. like at least in like some of the more modern conversations, like yeah, that's still rampant, and like obviously these are movies through the male gaze by men for men largely, and women still aren't like are people kind of, but like in a way that like makes men look cool. Back then in this one, it's very clearly like, oh no, they're literally just so we can like sell and perform. Like we are breeding them, like you were saying, to be a commodity, to be a product. They're not people, despite what anybody else says. And just the sort of brazen way that that's presented in this, I was just like, oh yeah, that's right. Like,
yeah, I mean,
okay.
It's really quick, but there is a scene. It's like 8 minutes in, where like all the ballerinas are backstage and they just saw the Phantom and they're all freaked out. It's like a quick clip, but there's like this dude like fluffing up some girl's dress, and it looks really bad.
Yeah,
really bad. And that's when I'm like, it's still there. And I wonder to this day, because I'm not in the performing industry, I wonder if fandom is still kind of like that. Like you can support people by purchasing their music and doing all this stuff and being a fan, but then what other things are out there that people do because they think it will get them something in return?
Ashley, I can absolutely tell you 100% that this still happens. A big reason why, before I found the DIY scene that I'm in, so I will never be a giant crazy musician, because I started to play in LA and a couple of places, and it was people literally like threw me up against a wall and said, I want to fuck you so hard right now. And I said, hey, my husband's right over there. And they're like, I don't care, and tried to force me in the bathroom. This absolutely still exists. And payola also, if it's not like, like sexual favors or anything, payola is still absolutely rampant and absolutely does exist. And nepotism babies are crazy. Even like Billie Eilish, she's a nepotism baby. Her parents have lots of money and are absolutely successful. And like, even though she recorded like in the garage with her brother, like they had every opportunity, right? Ariana Grande too, not to take away from these people's talent, but when we're talking about like benefactors, right? When we're talking about access to music lessons or to, to different resources that like, me, I don't have, right? Like, or, like somebody that doesn't come from wealth or doesn't come from proximity to that, like to that world already, that is absolutely something that still exists. It's really very predatory.
You're getting the shitty end of everything at every turn. Like when it comes to like finding the space to play, exactly, pay for play, that whole bullshit. But then secondarily, like with fans, a lot of the times because of that proximity to like, this really affected me, I own a part of that. Like I know you now and I want to be like that, like toxic fandom, that toxic, like I know you more than you know yourself. And it's like, oh no, that's not good.
Yeah, it is just still very predatory practices and everything. And it's very hard, not to say that some people don't make it, like, from where they're at and everything. without that. But it's still, I mean, especially right now today with like the economy, with like where we are as like, you know, millennials or Gen Z, I mean, we have no wealth, you know, like, am I going to be able to like live on the shows that I play? No. Sometimes I'll get like $10 for playing a show. Maybe.
Yeah.
You know, it's a whole thing.
Well, I feel like there was a nice little transition in here. We're talking about how it's been 100 years and nothing has really changed for women. I feel like I don't really have a whole lot else to say about this one, but it's a great place to get into the next one because of how much has changed, but simultaneously how much has like not when it comes to the way that women are treated in these stories.
In 1870s Paris, beneath the Paris Opera House, an elusive man calling himself the Phantom stalks chorus girl Christine Daae, posing as the Angel of Music. After abruptly rising to fame thanks to the Phantom's actions behind the scenes, Christine is reunited with her childhood boyfriend, Vicomte Raoul de Chagny. After the performance, Christine finds herself in the dressing room where she is visited by the Phantom, who persuades her to follow him through a secret door in the dressing room. She follows the Phantom to his lair deep in the Paris underground, where he professes his quote-unquote love for her and shows her a wedding dress he made for her, causing her to faint. When she wakes up, she unmasks the Phantom, causing him to dramatically lose his composure. Christine returns the mask and he returns her to the opera. The Phantom then attempts to blackmail the opera owners and their leading actress into having Christine take over the lead role permanently. However, the group choose to ignore the threat, leading the Phantom to sabotage the lead and Raoul and Christine to profess their love to one another. Unfortunately, the Phantom is indeed a stalker and hears the whole thing and plots his revenge.
Months later, Christine and Raoul attend the masquerade and announce their engagement as the Phantom belittles everyone and gifting them his opera. Raoul learns the Phantom was othered by society for his deformity and plots a trap for him using Christine as bait. The Phantom sidesteps the trap and drops the opera house chandelier on guests during the performance as cover while he kidnaps Christine once again. Raoul tries to follow them only to end up in one of the Phantom's torture chambers. He narrowly escapes, but tied up by the Phantom as he uses the opportunity to force Christine to choose to become his wife in exchange for Raoul's life. Christine kisses the Phantom and gives him her wedding ring out of pity, so he lets her go. The Phantom flees before the mob shows up. Raoul and Christine wed, and it's a happy ending? Question mark? Okay, where do we begin with this? I kind of like, well, maybe I should start with this. The director. I want to start with director. So Joel Schumacher, who is a famous director, he's directed many things, also famously gay. I think that like has a lot to do with the aesthetic and the choices in this, apart from obviously some of the other themes that we're going to get into. But I mean, he did Lost Boys, he did Batman Forever, Batman and Robin. He's done a bunch of cool stuff. I feel like there is a level of like silly queerness that is just sprinkled all over this movie, both in like just the visuals, but also in like the grandiose pompeity of like highfalutin late France of like 1880, right? Like it's just everything about this is so fun and flimsy, and like even the point of like the Phantom being like actually hot is funny to me, because it's like the whole thing is like, I'm so ugly, but it's like it's literally Gerard Butler who's like a total fucking hottie, and like
and he like walks around with these big fluffy white shirts open.
Literally, he's like
ribs.
he's literally always fucking posing. Like he is a hot person who's like, I have been looked at like an ugly piece of shit to my whole life, and you're like, you have a mirror, King. Like you're not gross. Like it's funny because it's, oh, I have a scar. And like when we finally see it, it's like, he's still hot. Like that changes almost nothing about his face. He's still like messy fucking hot. I don't know. I think it's funny because
I love that because
that feels
like,
very gay.
Yeah, because I feel like, I mean, just like everybody, like we could be like, oh, I don't like myself, I don't love this, but like he is just so over the top in all of these ways where like the scar could have been the smallest thing and he'd been like, don't fucking look at me, I'm the most hideous thing ever. Like, yeah. And I was just like, oh my gosh.
It's so silly.
I also really loved how over the top Carlotta was. How
she was
got
my favorite.
So
She's
incredible.
So good.
She has not one beauty mark, 2 beauty marks, 2 dogs, a palanquin to go to the stage. Like, fuck me up. I love her so much.
Everything about her was perfect. Like the entourage, the tantrums that like what was the song? The song where they get the letter in the atrium. It's like they're trying to find where Christine is. Everyone gets a letter and they're all reading off the letter like in tandem in this like
Yes.
collective chorus. I forget that song, but her whole bit, and as it's divulging into like them just following her, and she's like, no, 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 or whatever. Like it's just it's so funny, and she's like the perfect brat. She's the perfect like, I get everything I want, and I will scream if you say no. She's perfect. She's so perfect. Yeah. Oh.
That's my ranting about Carlotta. I'll probably touch on it later. But the fact that we open on her holding a prop of a severed head of a man.
Yes.
It's so good.
And then later we see it when she gets her dressing room back. They start putting her portrait up there, and she's again holding that severed
on the plate. It's like a gilded plate for like a dish, and it's just a man's head. And
I love it.
Literally that whole scene too, like one of her entourage members is just carrying this like 6-foot gilded framed portrait of her holding a man's head on a plate
Yes.
around behind her, just like, oh, okay. It's like, it's so silly.
It is silly, but it's like, all right, that's right. I mean, knowing the backstory of like how she probably got there, like, cool, you get what you want. That's fine.
Yeah.
I mean, truly, she's just so incredible. Anytime she's on the screen, she absolutely, like, she stole the show. Like, I was not looking or paying attention to anybody else. It was just only she existed.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, speaking of that opening scene, right? Like, all the other performers are slaves that are literally chained. And I think that's really... I was like, Slave Leia? Oh my gosh, because there was definitely Slave Leia vibes. And it was very culturally appropriative. But I do think that's a really good like way to open, especially for Christine, who like, she has no choice. Even at the end, she doesn't really have a choice. She just like, she's chained to the ballet. Then she's like owned by, Phantom, who's like, and like chained to like her dad and this weird legacy stuff. And then even at the end, she like is ultimately like chained to this person that she knew when she was like 7, like she doesn't really escape that. She doesn't really have a lot of autonomy, like at all. None of them do. She's just there, and like everybody else is making decisions for her and around her, even like the madam, Meg's mom, who I also really liked Meg, and I'm really sad that we didn't get more of Meg, because I'm like she's the best friend. She shows up at the end, and I'm like, you needed to be here this whole time, like, and she wanted to be, but the mom who like also helped like aid in the grooming of Christine, like she like literally everybody is just positioning her to where they want her to be, and she doesn't really have a choice. It's all just an illusion for her,
Well, I was going to say, this is like what we were kind of touching on in the last one, and also my biggest issue with this movie is that there still is this resounding level of, again, if we're looking at it from a genre perspective, it's romance. And like, this isn't a romantic story at all. Like there's nothing about Christine's relationship to the Phantom that is romantic. And I feel like these moments that are supposed to be, if we're looking at them at face value, it's her being kidnapped, liaised, poisoned, and hypnotized by her fucking stalker. But in these moments where she is literally a captive in his home, it's supposed to be like, oh, yes, like soft, and you're here, and we're hot, and you love me now. And it's like, let me woo you after I literally stole you because you belong to me. Like, you're an object that I own.
Well, and she's aware of it on some level, right? Like and she's aware of her objectification and of her being a tool for him, but she's okay with it because she thinks it's like the angel of music, which I want to absolutely get into, like the stuff with her dad and everything.
Yeah.
And like how that kind of like, there were signs, girl, and you needed to just like, you needed to trust your gut and not in this instance, your daddy's word. Right. But like, but she literally says like she calls herself his mask, like, and she like says that they hear him through like the phantom through her, right? So she doesn't even take credit for her own ability or where she's at. She just acknowledges that she's like a puppet or like a surrogate, like that he like a tool that he is using to like, you know, propel his vision or like his voice and everything, and without even ever meeting this person. And she's fine, like she met this guy online, she's never actually seen him in person, and she's like, oh,
Also,
but I'm so in love, girl.
She met this guy online when she was, say it with me, 7 years old.
Yes.
Oh my
Yes.
God. What? And that's, I think, like, and I understand that, like, well, actually, no, I don't understand. This is why I have the issue with it, is like, why are we romanticizing this relationship to a point where, like, even at the end where she's like having a hard time choosing and like, oh, but it's you and it's this guy, and it's like, I don't know why we're romanticizing their relationship at all. Like, I get for the sake of like story, but outside of that, I'm like, you're taking a lot of liberties already with like this classic film. You can take even more liberties and take out this whole concept of like this big air quotes romantic relationship. Like, it is so inconsequential to the story as a whole. He dies in the end anyways. Like, you
Not
could
in
have,
this one.
or yeah, but you know what? Like, you could.
Well, but
I
this
just
is
don't
what-
understand why we're romanticizing that here with her.
Again, this is what we're being told as young women, that like this is supposed to be romantic, like, and that's why like some of this is framed as romance, or it's like she even like struggles. She's like, look, I know he's bad, but like he's so sweet to me, right? Or he helped me so much. And it's like, again, he's been grooming her this whole time. And in like 2005 or 2004, we weren't really talking about grooming, right? We weren't talking about this type of culture, which happens and has happened historically for literally all of forever.
And so much.
But yeah, Eric, so it's like, it's really interesting because we always have that conversation of like humanizing a bad guy, right? Or like, you know, the bad guy is generally right. But in this space, it's really interesting because this has to deal with romance, and this has to deal with what women are supposed to find desirable, and that here we're allowed to have some conflict here, like where this is absolutely very bad and we should not be condoning this at all, instead of like, you know, being like, oh no, he's super bad, right? He's killing people. You're still romanticizing that even though he's like killing people, right? So we would rather like, this is acceptable for women, whereas like being a feminist is not acceptable.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, within the story and within most stories in general, women aren't people. Women don't have autonomy. Women don't have like perspective. They don't like, they're not seen as anything other than something for men and patriarchal structures to use for the benefit of men.
Yeah, I mean, I see it as just another reason for the Phantom to be a bad guy. You know, just
Right.
another reason. And yeah, he's a genius. I mean, he clearly taught himself how to play the organ.
Yeah.
Which is the hardest instrument to learn anywhere. But, you know, he did that from the bottom of the Paris Opera House. I guess, okay, maybe I'll suspend my belief that much. Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just another thing, because it is absolutely absurd to think that this guy who is older saw this girl at 7 years old, and maybe it did start out as like, yeah, she's got some talent, this should probably happen. But then as she grew up, did it develop into that for him? Like, I don't know, but it's still really wrong because he's still really old and she's still like 17.
Yeah.
Also, it's incredibly predatory because he's hearing her talk to her dad, presumably when she's like 7 and growing up, to her dad when, you know, she's mourning his death. Like, you know, he probably heard her at some point say like, you know, I know that you will send me the angel of music and I'm here, I'm ready to, you know, I'm at the opera. And so for him to then hear that and then assume that role, like, and she talks about like how she has a hard time, like, because of like, she's what, like in her 20s now, right? So like literally like over 15 years of just this grooming, right? Where she can't, even though she knows that he is bad, she can't reconcile the fact that the Phantom is the angel. She can't reconcile any of that because like, he's fucked her up so bad. He's manipulated her so bad over so many years that like
she can't get over it. She can't move on because she thinks she's
Right.
still either talking to her dad or an angel that her dad sent her, which is horrible.
It's so scary. And I get the perspective of like, she is young and she is conflicted from this space of like, she's not seeing it outside of like how we're analyzing this scene. So from her perspective, I get the conflict. But it's just, it's the level that they like romanticize that conflict that is so icky. Like,
to me, it feels like trying to, because like they're, like you were saying, Ashley, they were like he obviously is a genius, right? Like he wrote this whole opera, he did all this, but like that's like trying to defend, not that I think he's a genius, but like Harvey Weinstein, or trying to defend somebody that has done, like, you know, that sure they have talent, sure they have done so much, or you know, like I don't know, they're a great painter, they're a great artist, they're a great actor, director, writer, whatever, but like that doesn't mean that the abuse that they predicated, or like, you know, that doesn't excuse any of that, right? But like in this, it's like, oh, but he's a genius though, and it's like,
yeah, it's
wait a minute. Also, one of the things that I find the most traumatic about this is the Phantom essentially turns Christine's like passion into her trauma, to where she has to leave the opera. She can no longer sing. She can't even, this thing that she's worked all of her life to do and to be, and this thing that like was also this connection with her and her father, right? Like through music, through all of that is just trauma. And now she can't even think about, and again, like he tainted the memory of her father, who, you know, presumably loved her and gave her this gift of this love of music and everything. And he took that away from her.
Mess. I want to talk a little bit about Raoul and just like Patrick Wilson, because I think it's like the funniest nothing character in this movie, I feel like.
Oh my god, when he went to the bathroom, when in the masquerade, the Phantom comes down the stairs with this like incredible outfit with like this badass like sword that like has like a skull as like the hilts, right? Like, and in the middle of his descent, he literally is like, I gotta piss, and he walks away. And I was just like, oh my god, really? Like, is this
he's such a funny, because there is a level to him that you're like, okay, there's like an earnest care outside of like obviously the understanding that again he is still a man who thinks he's owed her, but there is some earnestness to this performance where he seemingly does care for Christine and like wants the best for her, but it does come from this place of like complete himbo, like totally no thoughts, just vibes for him, at least to me, because I feel like he just like runs and stumbles into the silliest traps and is like, he's not good at this. And like, yeah, sure, he cares about Christine, but I feel like it just felt goofy every time I see it. And also Patrick Wilson, I think, is just like a goofy guy who can sing, which I think is incredible. And I when I first found out that he could sing, I was like, what? But maybe that's my own thing. He just seems like a nothing character.
I think it was just really silly. Again, like just picking the most inopportune times to like go to the bathroom. He literally runs in on a white horse to that cemetery. Like literally.
Yeah, it's just like goofy guy. He's just a goofer.
Yeah. And the thing about him is he knew Christine when she was like 7, right? He doesn't know who she is now, but she sings, and that's another criticism I have of Christine, is she in this world, which again, the criticisms of like, you know, like the Phantom and how he's like predatory and everything are good because they're very real. Like it's absolutely real. And Christine, she only has value when she sings. Like anybody only cares about her when she sings, and they're like, oh, okay, you have value, you're a person, right? And that's the moment when Raoul is like, oh, she's my friend, I remember her, right? And he goes up and he's just like, hey, my friend. And she's like, I'm being stalked. And she's like, you need somebody to save you. And like he's like so like intent on like saving her suddenly and not knowing really anything about her, but like, oh, this person needs to be saved. She's hot, she sings, I know her, I'm in, right? And then like to the point to where, again, and this is very funny, where he's sleeping outside of her room because of course he is, because he's, you know, very chivalrous. But she like just like, and he's like keeps trying to be like, I'll give you freedom, I'll make sure that you're free, when like literally he's sleeping outside of her door, right? And she doesn't want him around all the time, clearly, because at that moment she skirts around him. She's like, good, he's asleep, I'm gonna go to the cemetery, I'm gonna go talk to my dad, it's gonna be great. And she like leaves, and then he wakes up and he's like, oh, and then runs in on the white horse, which again is the funniest thing.
Yeah.
Well, the white horse has a lot to do with like that dark and light symbolism, which that
Absolutely.
whole graveyard scene is about, like
Yes.
good and evil like fighting each other. So there's that. Yeah, it's hokey.
It's
And we
it's
love
like,
we love a good camp. We love good camp.
I
Absolutely.
love a good.
and so and that those are the elements of this movie that I feel are very Schumacher, where it is like there is that we're not trying to do anything profound here. It is what it is. Let's try to like, okay, cool. It is literally just this base level story. He's gonna be the dumb prince, who is just like 25-year-old child, like boy, who's just like, oh, the world is love. Like he's gonna be the embodiment of like the hope and innocence of like that particular style of character, and we're gonna pit him right. It's just it's good. It's cute. It's cute.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
it's good and evil. You know,
It's good and
there's a
evil.
lot of that in both films. Like even in this film, like because he's dressed in white a lot of the times, except for the masquerade scene. There's a lot of him just being put in light like the photography is well lit and things like that, whereas the Phantom is not always that way. Yeah, but there's a lot to that, and I understand the filmmaking choice of that. Like it is a choice. But I will say it is also a little bit refreshing to see a male in that role and not a female. Does that make sense?
And like the silly no thoughts just vibes.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's part of my thing is like I love it because it is just like he doesn't know, like he's obviously not like a damsel. He's not being damseled, but there is a level that like he has no capability. And I feel like again, a lot of the times like the women are always the incapable ones. They're the ones who have no skill, no strength, no power, no autonomy. They are simply to be passed from man to man. But he's like this, he's essentially that, except he's like male effacing. Like that's the only difference with him. I love that aspect.
It's very fun. And I think that plays itself really well on the subject matter and what we're talking about, right? Because it is very fucking heavy, some of this stuff, right? So like I think that is really well juxtaposed with like the Phantom, who is very methodical, who has thought literally every step of the way, who knows exactly what he's doing. And he's just like, oh, I'm here, just vibes, like you said, right? And he's just kind of like going based on whatever. He doesn't, even the plan that he has, the trap, the plan. How did you not know that was the Phantom on there? Why did nobody like just, you had like a million cops there. You had the entire stage crew. Everybody knows this is the Phantom. Just get him before he takes Christine. Just get him. And I like that he's so green in that, and in this, like he has the best intentions, but he doesn't listen to Christine where she's like, I don't want to do this because he's going to get me and I'll be gone forever. Like, you don't understand. And there's a really good line that she says where she says, am I to risk my life to have the chance to live? Do I even have a choice? Like, she recognizes that she has to like bend to whatever man's will that's around her, you know, and in order to be free, she has to play into their plans and what they want, right? So she's a very smart character, and it sucks that she like, and I think that's really cool and really complex because Christine is not dumb. She's not like she's the product of grooming. So that's why she has a problem seeing through or seeing exactly what the Phantom is and what he has planned for her. Whereas everybody else, I feel like she knows what's up, right? Or she like has like some sort of semblance, but like she's so aware and she knows, right? But she's also like, because she's been groomed, a willing participant in his abuse at like to a certain extent, right? Where again she's like recognizing, I'm the face, I'm this, like, okay, great, how do I get away from that? Oh, well, I guess we'll do your plan, Raoul. And like the whole time she's like looking at the audience like, he's right fucking here. And I'm just like, it's so over the top that I feel like in order to really, I don't want this to be a drama. I don't want this to be like, because it gets really icky. And for me, it could be really triggery to watch something like this. Like if we're really getting into like grooming and, you know, manipulation and big gross dudes in general, like that can be incredibly triggering. So I think the choice to make this as camp as it is was a really, really good choice, because
I agree.
I can sit here and I could talk about it, you know?
Yeah. What are you guys' opinion of Music of the Night? Like as a song and as a concept? Like it's a song about fucking, right?
It's a seduction song, yes.
It's a like where
Yeah.
he's essentially just being like, well, the euphemism of the music of the night is essentially the sound of like pleasure, the sound of like sex, largely, right? So I mean, arguably, I know that it's like in various forms, because again, a lot of these moments do have these like cool little codas where like in a different context these words mean different things. But Music of the Night, like especially in this one, it never really stuck with me. I just thought it was like he's like the dark brooding, like, come join the dark side and come be with me in the dark place because it's just as luxurious as the light or whatever. But there are a couple lines that he says in the song itself that are like, it's all about like this sensory, like touch it, feel its vibration, feel its like exaltation, feel the excitement of like, let your fantasies unwind, blah, blah, blah. Like join me in this like ecstasy, right? It never clicked to me as a young person, like listening to this and being like, oh, that's what he's doing. I literally just thought it was just like,
They literally,
oh yeah, come hang out at Hot Topic with me. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, come be bad. Like, let's be bad. But bad wasn't like, let's have sex. It was like, ooh, we can like kill people from the rafters together. You know what I mean? So this is the first pass that I've had with this song where I've been like, oh, he's like, this is like sexy song.
I mean, there's like literally a line in that song, because it's like in his opera, right, where he comes out on stage, where sorry, I don't know the names of the songs, so thank you for
yeah.
There's literally like a line where the last line before they both like disappear or whatever is like, when should we become one, right? And like I feel like this whole play is like, I mean, this whole song, right, is about him fantasizing about what it's going to be like, his first sexual interaction with Christine, right? And that like apprehension for that and with that. And so like also the imagery, right? Like Hot Topic, shout out. But like, you know, there's lots of flames. It's clear that it's supposed to be hell, which he sees himself in, right? And so like part of that is like him making her, I don't know, taking away her innocence, right? Or like, you know,
That's exactly what that
bringing
song's
her
about.
down with that, right? So like he's like even more sexualizing where they're at, right? Or what he sees potentially happening with her.
Yeah. And there's also like the whole conversation about like the angel of music being Lucifer himself, and like so there's the tie-in of like he is the angel of music, right? Isn't that a part of like Catholic lore, is that Lucifer himself, when he was an angel of music? And so like when he fell to hell, that, I mean, part of like his job in heaven was to be one of like the heralders, one of the ones of like the the Prince of Exaltation, who would like shout praises and be like this animated musical big, like, yes. I think it's like debated, but there is conversation around him being a literal angel of music.
I'm looking online, and there are some people that are like absolutely not, and some people are like, well, maybe actually, like,
so if there is that double
cool.
entendre, especially with Phantom embodying everything that is evil or like misunderstood, I think is better than just evil. Lucifer being in this lore arguably one of the big air quotes most misunderstood characters, he wants that, and he wants to embody all that is like rebuked and shunned, and he is the embodiment of that. And literally in this the the equating himself to the literal devil by being like, I am the angel of music, I am the one from the underground, I am the one who you fear the most but has the most control. I don't know, it's interesting.
And
I like it.
The rest of that song too, I think, is about like, because I think it starts off with like, you know, the poor people rising up and eating the rich, right? And then devolves into like, I want to have sex with Christine. So we're getting kind of that stuff that we were talking about with the last film. Like, that's like, instead of having that one line, that one really great line that you pointed out, Ash, it's just baked into that song, which I think was cool. But then it's like, he can't just think about that or concentrate on that, because like, hey girl, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, that whole scene, that whole hellfire scene, that, I don't know if you caught the name of that opera that he wrote. It was called Don Juan Triumphant.
Yes.
And you've heard the references to, oh, he's a regular Don Juan. Like, that's from like another opera. I forget what it's all about, but his specific character is one who seduces women and just is done with them afterwards.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's the like the suave masculine, like, oh wow, he's kind of a player and he's like so powerful and like women want him but he could care less.
Of course, that is his.
That's who he wants to be.
That's who he wants to be,
so
and of course,
bad.
that's like who he wants to cast himself as in this role, right? Of course, such an incel move.
It is the most 14-year-old boy bullshit. Like, oh yeah, I've been with so many girls. Like, it is so childish and so adolescent. Like, and that's who the Phantom is at the end of the day. I mean, literally one kiss and he's like, fuck, like I actually don't know what to do. Like, he like panics and like runs away. Like, you know what I mean? It's just he is the most adolescent incel figure. I do think it, like, did we talk about his backstory in this one?
Not yet.
Not yet. So that's one of the big things too about this, is where we do get into a little bit more of his backstory and about his relationship with Madame Geary?
Sherry.
Madame Curie is somebody totally different, Eric.
Madame Cherie. What did I say?
Curie. Madame Curie. And I'm like, Eric, that's somebody else.
Oh, no. Okay. Her. So we get the whole backstory about how like she watches him get beat up for money in the cage. And then as people leave, she witnesses him kill his abuser and she helps him escape, which I like, because it is still like, yeah, sure, he's killing somebody, but it's coming from this place of self-protection and it makes his story more complicated, because again, it does feed into the conversation of like cyclical violence and generational trauma, where like this innocent kid is put into this impossible circumstance because of his physical appearance and the way that he's completely rejected by society. And now he is this villainous character who's doing similar violence against this young girl in a way that would like, so you're watching this happen in real time. And so there's a complexity to it. And there's also some complexity to like how we feel about Madame Sherry.
Yeah.
How we feel about her, because like she's aiding him. She's letting him do this. She's aware of everything that's happening and she's keeping quiet about it for the sake of like this history, this historical context that she has with him.
Well, not only that, but she's also like, she sees him, she pities him. She's like, oh my gosh, go under here. Like, we'll talk in a minute. And essentially she like, and this is a very performative, to me, it's performative activism or performative allyship, right? Where she is just like, oh, it's okay. I'm so sorry you're dealing with this. Let me help you. And her way of helping is like putting him in the in the catacombs where nobody's ever going to find him. And is she feeding him? Yes. Is she making sure he has what he needs? Yes. But is that helping him? No. And then she's presumably the only person that like he really has any sort of a friendship with or anything, right? Or any sort of communication with. And that communication then like, rather than like not necessarily teaching right from wrong, because then that gets into like a whole other conversation, right? But like having meaningful conversations with him and like, you know, like maybe like trying to like reintroduce him to society or like help or anything. She just is like, here, stay out of the way and be down here. And she enables his like grooming of Christine, and she like encourages it, and she like even tells Christine like, he's proud of you tonight, you did well, right? And all of this stuff where she shelters her daughter from him, and she's like, don't you dare go back there ever, don't go in the dungeon ever, no. She is like encouraging Christine to go down there because like I feel like she has deluded herself into thinking, well, maybe this will fix him, or maybe he just needs a woman, or like, you know, but again, like this poor woman, Christine, I feel so bad for her, has been like set up to be like, you know, targeted by him and enabled by her best friend's mom. Like, how fucked is that?
Yeah, it's a weird fucked up situation. And again, at the end of the day, Christine triumphs because she is just so capable and so positive. I mean, literally an impossible situation where like all the adults in your life who you trust essentially have double crossed you and set you up for literal failure. And she's still, because of her capabilities, is still able to like overcome them. But it is interesting to watch that her character, just because she's a mess and a problem, but also that intent of like trying to help him. I can see a 12-year-old who just watched this kid get the shit kicked out of him. Like, there's not like, what other choice would she have to like help apart from like, hide from these people who are trying to kill you, I'll bring you bread, you know what I mean? But because like that's a choice, and that just becomes a regular thing for her even as she grows up, it's not really reconsidered. And I mean, literally her sending Christine in there is like, girl, that's gross. You need to stop. Like, that's not cute. I know we've done like so much critiquing, but I do want to just like talk about the music as it stands, because like in this one in particular, it is its own subset of like the movie. The music itself is like its own thing.
It's like really sappy, but my favorite one is All I Ask of You.
Yeah,
it's really sappy and really cheesy. However, because a man says in the song, wherever you go, let me go too, to have a man follow you, that's pretty great. It was a mutual thing in the end of the song, you know, like just wherever we go, we just go together. That's what I like about that song.
But him coming to the table first and foremost and being like, I will go wherever you need me to go, as long as I get to be there. I get to be in your presence. Yeah. That is the dream. That is the success that I'm looking for. Yeah. Ooh, it's so sweet and cool. And again, he's like such a sweet character. Big, silly little baby himbo, but he's like nice. He's nice. In this one, he's nice.
Well, there's no ulterior motives with the himbo, right? And we love that. And that's also, that's so good for Christine, and that's exactly what she needs after literally being manipulated by everybody in her life. Just like to be like, oh, I always know exactly what you're thinking. This is wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just love the fact that Christine is the only one who's just like trying to make the best out of a bad situation when everyone else is trying to control the situation. Even the stupid new owners of the opera, they have they're so bumbling. They're so
talk
silly.
About himbos.
Yeah. I also like
I know they're supposed to be the fools of the whole thing, and you're supposed to laugh at them, but they have just sat back and done nothing. Just like Carlotta said, you guys do nothing. So if nothing happens, this doesn't happen. Like, God, that was just fun.
In my little headcanon, I 100% see them as a couple. They're just like this couple who just like bought the thing, and they're just like, oh yes, that and this and whatever, and we're just rich. And like the fact that one of them just keeps like, it's like, oh yeah, like a junk business is like, it's scrap metal. It's actually scrap metal. And like, it's just, that seems like such a point of derision in their relationship in like a cute way. And it's just, in my head, that's how I see them.
But because like everyone else is so controlling and everything, and at the very end, like the big climax scene where like Raoul's tied up and he's gonna die, and the Phantom is like holding the rope and everything, and like, this is your choice, this is the point of no return, and she just goes and pities him and is just like, what kind of life have you known? Like, what have you been through to bring you to this? Like, to put someone like me in this situation and someone like him. And there's a lot in there prior to that part where she's just like, whatever pity I would have had, I would have been angry for you. And then she turns around and then is just like, there isn't a choice to make. But what I can do is show you grace. And she like asks for God for the courage to do something that she doesn't really want to do, obviously, but she's going to show him like, look, no one cares about your face right now. Like, everyone cares about the choices you're making. And she holds him accountable and just shows him, forgiveness isn't the right word, but it's like she shows him that, you know, the word she uses is, you aren't alone, really. And look, this is something that I can do. And in that, he's overwhelmed, and like you said earlier, he just totally loses his mind and just doesn't know what to do, freaks out and lets him go, which is probably the best escape plan I've ever seen.
Literally. Like, I mean, to be fair, it's probably the first time anybody's ever like earnestly tells him like, I see you.
Yeah.
Like, just I get it. I get you. And he understands it, and like, oh yeah, panic. Like, I've never been shown compassion. I've never been shown like any semblance of like empathy ever. What is this feeling? I'm freaking out 100%.
Yeah. And then as soon as that's done, like as soon as he lets them go, he goes to play with his his little chimp with the symbols, and visits with what I saw this time. I didn't see it before because obviously I'm watching this in a different context now. But he visits with his inner child a little bit. And he's like, you know what? Yeah, I just need to hide. I just need to hide now. And, you know, that's exactly where he was when he first got there. And she shows back up and gives him the ring, and he just goes, Christine, I love you. And she doesn't say anything because she can't love him back. Like, he's a horrible person. And that is so tragic. But it's the best way for that to end, I think. Yeah. Yeah. I just love that scene that he goes back and visits, you know, his childhood toy, or at least something like it. And then that is like where the movie ends and where it begins at the auction and everything. And
which I thought was like a really interesting tentpole of like framing the story, right? We're seeing this set, like we open on the opera house, however many years later, they're auctioning off all this stuff, and it's that monkey that really revitalizes, and we watch the whole thing sort of like colorized, which was also a fun nod to like the original black and white film, where we're like kind of seeing similar sets, we're seeing similar framing, and then suddenly it's full color. And like, I mean, the goofy like Wizard of Oz shit where it's just like, woo, everything like comes to life and is gorgeous and illuminated, and then we end literally on that same thing where like, yeah, like you said, that's kind of where a whole nother story begins after the fact. And it's just, it was good. It was cool.
Yeah, and I like that he doesn't die in this one. I like that that he's not just treated like the bane of society, killed and thrown into the sun. He's given some sort of mystery again, where he's like, okay, this part is done. I'm moving on, but the fact that he like sat down with his toys, something like maybe he's gonna go and think about what he did.
Maybe there's some sort of recognition of that cyclical trauma that we mentioned, right? Where he is like able to finally go and revisit that part of his past in a different light, in a different way, and then maybe move forward from there. Because I mean, like, presumably, I mean, I guess there's a phantom too, but we don't, he doesn't go and do this again, right? Like maybe he does sit with his actions. Maybe he does kind of like try to reconcile that. I think that that's really cool and interesting. I'm a little bit like, if you guys hadn't mentioned that, I would have like never thought that, because I'm way less forgiving. Because I'm just like, ugh.
I don't know if it's forgiveness that I would give him, but
sure. I mean,
there's a little tinge of hope for him. To deal with it.
You know what? Uncle Ira was a war criminal, so
like literally.
Yeah. Alrighty, so we are back.
We're back.
Let's talk about the first one. Eric, who do you think this movie was for? The 1925 Phantom of the Opera.
I don't know. Horror fans. Horror fans? You know what? I actually don't know. I'm going to say the eyebrow muscles of all the actors, because of how much of that they had to do, just like, because they're not talking. So it's just like big eyes and like huge faces. There was a lot of face muscle work in that film. So I'm going to say it's for the muscles of the actors' faces.
Incredible. Ashley, what about you?
General audiences, honestly, because movies were still, they weren't new per se, but they were definitely like something that people did for fun. It was an escape, and it is like there is some depth to it, but there's a lot more action and drama and everything like that. And I feel like that's what people go to the movies for, to see a show. And it was a show. It was really great and captivating. So that's what I think it was for.
Jess, who do you think it was for?
I want to say that it was for women as like a cautionary tale against, like weirdo internet boys.
I was like, how so?
Because like in this one, it's not presented as like a potential romance, right? Like it is very clear that this person is absolutely predatory. They're being absolutely awful. And like she's hypnotized to go with him. She doesn't really like kind of go of her own volition. Like I feel like there's a lot of things. So it's just like cautionary, be mindful, ask questions, don't go to places alone. I don't know. But like just be cautious as a woman about like who you're around and who you're interacting with. Eric, did you like this movie?
I did. I honestly, I really enjoyed it. It was much better than I thought it was going to be. Yeah.
What about you, Ash?
I did like it. I like campy horror movies anyway. So this just kind of like, there's that nostalgia. But I mean, I know that's what we're here for, but but there is a certain nostalgia to it. And, I love Universal monsters. And while it didn't, like this whole Phantom thing did not start with that, I'm really glad I went back to it, because there was a lot of that consistency of like good and evil, like the levels of where people are in society being reflected in this opera house, like the Phantom wanting Christine, who is like a literal angel, to save him. And there's just I enjoyed that part of the story and how it was really there in the first film.
Yeah. I also really liked it. Kind of jumping off of what you were mentioning, like it was very intentional, like you said, of like she's a literal angel. He wants her to fix him, but he's not willing to do any of the work on his own. And again, I will say that this is for women, because that is absolutely, if a man is not willing to do any work on his own or to meet you halfway or anything, they're not worth your time as a friend or as something more. But and I also just really, I didn't expect to really like this movie as much. Like there's a couple of silent films that I really like, but for the most part, like some of them can be so choppy and so hard to follow, or, or I don't know, like some, like they're not as substantive, but I do feel like this was like very poignant, very substantive, especially for the time. It might not have had as much nuance. Like I loved the caricatures of like, everybody had to like literally be a caricature of this archetype in order, like, with their facial muscles, in order to like get us to like know their motivations and what they're thinking of, because there is not room for nuance with like certain things in that medium. But the playing of like the color of the film and things like that, I thought were just really fun and really engaging. So it is really, I did enjoy it. Okay, so Phantom 2004. Was it new, interesting, the same, progressive, regressive? How are you feeling, Eric?
I thought it was new and interesting because it was a musical. That's a huge change from the original story. They also took some liberties, especially with the ending, especially with some of the character work. I thought it was both new and interesting. Progressive also just in terms of giving a little bit more backstory to some of these characters and a little bit more nuance in ways that like the first one really doesn't. It's just a monster versus a damsel. Like that's at the end of the day kind of all it was. Whereas this, like, there's backstory, there's intention, there's conflict in ways that feel a little bit more deep than the first. That's why I would say it's a little bit progressive in that way.
What do you think, Ash?
Because it was originally a novel, and I bought the novel because I wanted to read it.
That.
Yeah, it was written in 1910, and because it was a novel first, and I intentionally did not read the novel just so I could do this and not have any preconceived notions about it. And then it became a horror movie, and I don't know if the book is like that or not, but I've heard that there's like so much more character development in the books and stuff, and to have it on a silver screen in a silent movie, by the way, silent movie about an opera and music,
right?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
To have that level of depth still in the story and be able to see conflict in people's performances, I thought was really great and really new for silent movies, you know. I thought the new one was definitely progressive because we got more of Christine's story and we got to see her be the star of the movie. Yes, she's the star of the movie in the 1925 one, but she's not really a person. She's motivation for all these other people, right? Mm-hmm. And she's kind of, again, put up on that pedestal of an angel. And in this one, yeah, there's nods back to that, you know, where she's on the stage and there's angels in the background and statues everywhere of angels and stuff. But it's, I thought it was a lot more character driven for her. And we got to see a little bit more of Phantom as well, but still not so great when it comes to like, this guy's been stalking her since she was 7. Gross.
Yeah.
So that I don't think was great. But you can't really change the story, you know. Like,
yeah,
that's what it comes down to. So good on some points, filmmaking, character choice, things like that, but the story is still really gross.
Yeah, I thought that it was new, like it was for all the reasons that you both said, like where it was we got to see more of the characters and more of the nuance within them and kind of their interactions to each other. Christine is actually a person rather than, you know, like being objectified. Like she's aware of her objectification in her relation to men, but she's like still trying to, like, you know, she's still hopeful, trying to find her space, you know, and trying to find a way out of that sort of prison that she finds herself in. So I thought that it was really interesting also for that same reason. And like a lot of the story beats were the same, just with that extra information. It just did recontextualize some of those scenes and some of those moments. And again, like now this is a romance rather than a horror. So even within having a lot of these same beats, like just that context or like that character work that they did, then like completely changed the genre, where the first one was just basically like, you know, an outline, right? But I did think that it was progressive for those same ways that we talked about, but also a little bit regressive because of she was 7 years old and things like that. And you know, we've talked at length about that, but you know, that's where I'm at. Eric, who was this for, the 2004?
Gerard Butler's acting career. Because this is like one of the first big things that he's like really in, apart from like Dracula 2000. So it's like, this is it. And then like 2 years later, 300 happened and he became this like macho superstar.
Oh my gosh, he's the guy in 300 too.
I know. And this was like right before, like, well, a couple years before it. So shout out Gerard Butler.
Totally. Ashley, who is this for?
Aside from Andrew Lloyd Webber fans and people who can't get to the theater, because it's really expensive to go see a show. I mean, they're fantastic. They are fantastic, but that hasn't changed. Like you still need to have some money to go see a show. Aside from putting it in theaters and making it more accessible to audiences, I really think it was for people who love romance stories. You know, I mean, that's really what it's about for the musical side of things. What did you think?
I thought this was for, like you said, Ashley, the theater is very expensive. It is still very selective of who can, it's still a rich person thing, right? So this was so the world, including me now, could know that because the world needed it, and here we are now. So I'm better for it. I'm better for knowing that song. Did you like it, Eric?
I did.
Cool.
I did.
How about you?
I did.
How about you, Ashley?
Oh, of course I liked it. It is problematic, but you know, the story's great. The music's fantastic. It is wonderful to take a little bit of escape into the opulence of 1860s France. And man, French society is not great.
Yeah, I also really liked it. I didn't know what I was getting into, and here I am now. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you so much for being on the podcast, Ashley. This has been so much fun.
This
Thank
was so
you.
much fun. I really enjoyed this little mental exercise of watching something in a different way, which is so nice. And that's what I enjoy about your podcast. If I could fangirl just a little bit. I really enjoy learning more about how society portrays other people, because the experience is not always the same. And coming from a very cis white suburban background, like there's not that perspective, and getting that from you guys is fantastic. Like, I think you guys are doing great work here. Really proud of you.
Oh,
Thank you. That's very nice to hear.
We take compliments so well.
Thank you.
Yes, you do.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much. Please come back again at another time. We would love to have you.
Yes, please.
Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Yeah, please don't forget to rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on all of our social media. Interact with it, like it, love it. Send it to your friends. It helps us immensely.
Yeah. Our artwork and music is by Eric Lefebvre, editing by Danny Barkley. And thank you again, everybody, Ashley and Eric.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
And remember, stay cute.
And stay critical. Good.
Bye.
Bye. Goodbye. 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 This podcast has been brought to you by the NOTstalgia Network.
Visit thenotStalgiaNetwork.com for more.
You enter the dungeon and see the evil wizard pointing his wand directly at you. He says, "Show me a funny and delightful actual play Dungeons & Dragons podcast, or I'll consume your souls!" What do?
I take out my phone and find Quest Friends Forever on Spotify.
I show him how to find Quest Friends Forever on Apple Podcasts.
I share the Quest Friends Forever Instagram and YouTube pages with him.
And you all get critical hits!
Yay!
Quest Friends Forever is an actual play podcast starring 4 friends with varying levels of Dungeons & Dragons experience. Join us for new episodes every other Wednesday as we embark on fantasy adventures, play fast and loose with the rules, and laugh at each other's shenanigans. No prior D&D knowledge is required to listen, so everyone can feel free to join the fun. Quest Friends 4, that's the number 4, like how there's 4 of us, ever. Find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. That's Quest Friends Forever.